The night it happened, Blackwood fell into an unnatural silence that defied all logic. At first, people thought it was a power outage. No car alarms, no hum of electricity, no barking dogs. But soon, fear spread as they realized it wasn't just technology that had gone quiet. The entire world had. Sheriff Mara Callan stepped into the street, her boots making no sound on the pavement. Her lips moved as she called for help, but nothing came out. Not a whisper. Panic filled the town as people screamed soundlessly, their mouths open in terror, their cries swallowed by the silence. Airplanes drifted overhead without engines, rivers flowed without splashing, and the night was filled with a stillness so deep it felt alive. As the hours passed, a strange pressure built inside everyone's heads, like the silence itself was pushing against their thoughts. Mara looked to the forest beyond the town, where a faint shimmer danced between the trees, the only sign of motion in a world that had forgotten noise. That night, the people of Blackwood understood something unspoken. Sound hadn't disappeared naturally. It had been taken, and whoever took it wasn't done yet. Days later, a small group decided to explore the forest on the outskirts of Blackwood, desperate to understand what was happening. The place was later called the Forest Without Sound, a name whispered through trembling hands. Inside, the air felt thicker, heavier, almost as if it resisted movement. Every step left no crunch of leaves, no breaking of branches, only the eerie vibration beneath their feet, a heartbeat deep within the earth. They found strange carvings on the trees, a symbol like a zero with a line through it. Empty set. It appeared everywhere, etched into bark, stones, even on the walls of an abandoned ranger's cabin. As they ventured deeper, time seemed to slow, their watches freezing at 12:03 a.m. Then, without warning, the ground quivered. The silence broke for one terrifying second with a low, rumbling hum that shook their bones, then vanished again. One of the men, trembling, pointed to the treetops where faint lights flickered, forming patterns like Morse code. Sheriff Mara realized they weren't random. They were a message, one that repeated endlessly, "Do not wake them." The silence spread beyond the forest, consuming the neighborhoods one by one. Streets once alive with chatter and music now looked frozen in mid-motion. Doors wide open, cars stopped at intersections, food left half-eaten on tables. The silent neighborhood, they called it. Surveillance cameras captured scenes that made no sense. People walking and then vanishing mid-step, shadows moving independently from their owners, pets standing still, staring at nothing. In one house, Sheriff Mara found a family sitting on the couch, perfectly still, eyes open but unseeing, as if paused in time. Only one person seemed unaffected, a young girl named Elara, who claimed she could still hear faint echoes when she stood near the forest's edge. She said the world wasn't truly silent. It was humming, just beneath hearing. When Mara placed her ear to the ground, she felt it too, a deep vibration, pulsing like a buried engine. That night, Elara wrote a single word on her window in the condensation. "They're listening." Dr. Raymond Kessler, a scientist from Portland, arrived in Blackwood after intercepting a strange data transmission. The readings showed an impossible frequency spike moments before the silence began, a sound so intense it caused global interference. He called it the frequency that kills. In his lab, Kessler replayed the recorded waveform through an analog speaker. Within seconds, lights flickered, electronics sparked, and the walls began to vibrate violently. Mara watched in horror as the waveform made glass shatter and sent everyone to their knees, blood dripping from their ears, even though no one could hear it. When the test ended, Kessler realized the silence wasn't just absence, it was protection. Someone had silenced the world to prevent that frequency from spreading again. He traced its source back to a government project, an acoustic experiment meant to weaponize resonance. The experiment, known as Project Quiet Dawn, had vanished from records 10 years ago. The closer they got to its secrets, the more the silence pulsed, almost warning them to stop. But it was too late. Something deep in the forest had already awakened. Following a trail of encrypted documents, Mara, Kessler, and Elara discovered an abandoned U.S. military facility hidden under the mountains outside Blackwood. The gates were twisted open as if melted from within. Inside, walls were blackened with scorch marks, and the smell of burned ozone filled the air. In the main control room, a single sentence was written in blood on the console. Silence is mercy. They found logs of experiments conducted to harness subsonic frequencies capable of altering consciousness and reality itself. The final log entry described a sound collapse, a resonance wave that destabilized physical space. When they accessed the security archives, the footage showed scientists screaming in silence as the sound imploded, pulling everything inward before the screen went black. Elara felt a tremor beneath her feet and whispered that the silence wasn't meant to kill, it was meant to contain. As they left, a motion sensor light flickered on, illuminating a shadow at the end of the hall. But when they turned to look, nothing was there, only the faint outline of a hand pressed into the dust-covered glass. Back in town, the survivors found a place where time itself seemed broken. The town square looped endlessly. People walked the same path, performing the same gestures, over and over again, like ghosts trapped in an invisible cycle. It was called the town that never spoke. Elara noticed that their lips moved backward, repeating conversations from the past in reverse. Kessler recorded the phenomenon and discovered the people were afterimages, echoes of the town before the silence. Each time the clock tower struck midnight, they reset, trapped in the last moment before the sound vanished. As the trio watched, one of the echoes turned its head unnaturally fast, locking eyes with Elara. Though it was only an echo, it mouthed a single word clearly: run. Terrified, they fled the square as the air around them rippled like water. The echo voices began to merge into a single, continuous hum, a frequency rising in power. They realized the silence was thinning, and when it broke, whatever had been held back might finally return. Elara believed the only way to restore balance was to reintroduce sound slowly. Using her unique ability to feel resonance, she entered the forest's heart, the origin of the silence. She found a stone monolith inscribed with the same empty set symbol. As she placed her hands on it, vibrations surged through her body. The ground split, and the world roared for the first time in days. But it wasn't the peaceful sound of life, it was chaos. Screams from every direction, animal howls twisted into human cries, wind shrieking like sirens. The trees bent as if in agony. The silence hadn't been a curse, it had been a barrier. Now that sound had returned, something dark and ancient stirred beneath the forest floor, its voice resonating through every living thing. Mara tried to pull Elara away, but she stood motionless, eyes glowing faintly, whispering words no one could hear. The noise became unbearable, forcing the others to flee. When it stopped, Elara was gone. Only the monolith remained, now humming faintly, as if remembering her touch. Weeks later, sound returned to the rest of the world, but it wasn't the same. The ocean waves carried a low moan. Radios played faint whispers beneath music, and the wind sometimes spoke names. Governments declared Blackwood a restricted zone, renamed it Silent Zone 51. All records of the incident were buried, but the people who survived still heard faint echoes in their sleep. Sheriff Mara received a final message on an old tape recorder, static at first, then Elara's voice, distorted but clear. Silence was the only thing keeping them asleep. As Mara looked toward the dark outline of the forest, she realized the silence might come again, not as a curse, but as mercy. Because now the world was full of sound, and something else was listening.